when I run the predictive analytics just on the analytical side, it'll give me likelihood of failure 80%. So what does it mean? That's the part that the LLM can help you with. So a team of 6 agents, one of them being an operations agent, one of them being an energy forecaster. Because what you want is the energy forecaster is trained, specialized, and has a PhD in energy forecasting. It will determine what's the price now. And we also don't want to switch the pump on and off, on and off, on and off, because that reduces our reliability of the pump. And by the way, we have a reliability agent as well in this team. What these things are really good at is self-monitoring. And if we set a goal, they can check how good are we at the goal. They're much better than humans at self-reporting. Now, we know as humans, these are good things to do. We just don't have the time. We need to collect the data, or we need to put it in a spreadsheet, and we need to kind of do some of the analysis. These things can just do it in real time, continuously.
Welcome to the Industry 4.0 TV podcast, where we explore the application of artificial intelligence in manufacturing. I'm your host, Kudzai Manditereza, and today we will discuss building intelligent digital twins with generative AI. And I'm joined by Pieter van Schalkwyk, who is the CEO of XMPRO. Okay, so maybe before we get into it, could you introduce yourself to the audience and tell us more about XMPRO?
Okay, so yeah, I'm Pieter van Schalkwyk. I'm the CEO at XMPRO. My background's in mechanical engineering, so I used to work on the engineering side, and for a number of years, been on the other side. Then decided to get involved on the kind of digitization and digital side of the manufacturing and other heavy industry like oil and gas, mining, energy, utilities. And through that, built experience with what we're now seeing as digital twins, intelligent digital twins. Outside of, and we'll talk a little bit around XMPRO, but outside of XMPRO, I'm also the chair for I used to be the chair for Natural Resources Working Group inside Digital Twin Consortium. I now lead the joint AI working group, and there's a number of initiatives inside Digital Twin Consortium and the OMG around AI specifically. I also created the capabilities periodic table for digital twins, which is also part of the Digital Twin Consortium. So we have a working group that works on that. I also lead that, and been involved with a number of initiatives around standardization and a number of other things around, again, digital twins, manufacturing, and industry in general. XMPRO is a intelligent business operations suite, which is built on intelligent digital twins. And I think we'll delve down a little around what intelligent digital twins are. But XMPRO is predominantly focused on how can we look for events that are happening that are either happening in real time or that are likely to happen. And how can we predict those? How can we focus on those? And how do we address the actions that need to come from that? So how can we get digital twins not just to be data repositories, but to be intelligent advisors? And with AI, and more lately with things like generative AI, we have much more capability to do that. So it's a key focus for us at XMPRO, focus predominantly on manufacturing, energy and utilities, mining, oil and gas, all those asset intensive and complex digital twin opportunities.
Awesome stuff. That's fascinating, and I'm really excited to dig into some of the concepts that you brought up just now. So, I mean, to get things going, I mean, one could argue that we are in an era where generative AI is set to become a general purpose technology, as it were. I mean, we have seen the wave, like this incredible wave, for the past 2 years with the transformations that generative AI has brought to industries, and but yet there are manufacturers, for the most part, who might still be on the fence about investing in generative AI today. And you wrote an article about what lessons manufacturers can learn from past tech revolutions to understand the agency of adopting generative AI today. So maybe to start things off, could you kind of like unpack your thoughts for
Hmm.
us on this subject?
Thank you, Kudzai. Yeah, interesting topic. So as we deal with, and it's not just manufacturers, it's kind of in industrial markets generally. I think there's there's at the moment a lack of understanding of what it really can do. So there's a lot of experimentation, but in terms of implementation, we haven't seen a lot of case studies or success stories. So people are naturally a little bit reluctant to look at this. And also, these things cost money. It's disruptive. We have to change our business processes. So there's a number of reasons why there's some friction to adopt this. But if you look back in history, there were a number of technologies which started in a very similar way. So if you look at the railways in the US specifically, um, it it took a while for it to really take off. But and it was actually not about the rail system that was put in. It is and a lot of money, a lot of investment and everything went into it. And when they connected the east to the west with the rail system, suddenly there was a new utility. There was transport. New towns came up, and that actually facilitated the trade. And to a large degree, that's one of the reasons why the US is the powerhouse that it is because we created a new utility that we could put in, and that again, it took a little while to do, but once that utility was established, suddenly everything else around it exploded from an opportunity perspective. And it's not, and it wasn't about more rail cars. In actual fact, if you look at the number of rail companies that are left, there's only a few large generators or a few large rail operators left. But in terms of all the cities, the infrastructure, the supply chains, everything that developed around that capability. Another one is electricity. So if we look at how electricity started, again, the investment that went to putting in the lines and all of that, again, that changed the whole way. In actual fact, it's the electrical motor. So if you look at how electrical motors went from, we had steam, or there was originally, all factories were built right next to rivers, so we could get those big wheels turning, and then that would turn the machines inside. There was the concept of electricity that started, and how it got generated and then being able to be transported and distributed to, and then it could turn electric motor. So that it took a while, and actually I think 40 or 50 years for that to take off. But you won't find a factory now. In actual fact, all those factories that were operated by those big wheels and this local steam turbines and all those things, they're all gone, because we now had a utility. The cost of there was a utility provider, and we could just tap into that utility. Everyone now can tap into electricity. You don't have to have your own generation. We're seeing the similar thing with generative AI, where when it started, there were a few large generators, if I can call it that, like OpenAI with ChatGPT and Anthropic and Google, and it's creating that utility. So we can just tap in. I don't have to build those models. I don't have to invest that kind of money, but I now have a new utility, and that utility enables a whole bunch of new business opportunities, like electricity did, like the rail did, like the internet did. If you think about the internet cables and everything that went in, there was infrastructure that was created, and suddenly it's not about the internet hosting company anymore. It's actually about what the business models that could do. And we're seeing the same thing for generative AI, and especially those applications that we can put in the industrial space, where it can help us operate our businesses and our business processes, because we've got skills challenges and a whole bunch of other things. And these things are really good at doing work where humans either suck or we find stuff hard to do.
Awesome stuff. So, I mean, before we jump into our topic for today, so who that, like, I mean, a lot of manufacturers would be asking themselves, is it the right time to start experimenting with this technology, maybe to get a digital fluency of exactly how it works? Should they go all in right now? What do you have some thoughts on exactly what approach manufacturers should take?
Look, I think, like any new technology, you have to first understand it before you can apply it. So our recommendation, and what we're seeing for companies that are successful with this, is those who are already starting to look at not just experimentation or, can it help me write a better email or those kind of things, but what are the real business applications? So can it help me? I can give you an example for a manufacturer, actually for EV manufacturer, the electric vehicle manufacturer, who can now generate specifications around EV cars, in reducing the time that it takes by 80% and the human involvement by 90%. Now, you can think that for them it's a massive saving. So something that would take 2 or 3 man years in terms of, or person years in terms of putting specifications, because it's a very highly regulated industry and things like that, to put that together is very complicated and it takes a lot of time. Now, the benefit of doing it using a generative AI model for them is it reduces the cost to literally under $10 to do it, what would cost, and it's actually work that the humans don't like to do, because we're not really good at curating all that content. What we're really good at is checking it. So again, it's all checked by humans. But those are some of the, so in terms of how organizations should start, my recommendation is, don't change everything, but start with a change. And it's more than just simple experimentation, as I said, in terms of personal productivity. We're seeing a lot of things where it impacts personal productivity, where I can write the email faster, or I can generate a report faster, or I can read the content of a long report quicker because I can ask it to summarize. Those are all personal productivity things. But in terms of how we apply it to our business, start thinking about those areas in terms of how it can really change some of your business process, operational business processes, and then start kind of with the onion ring layer approach. So start small and then build it out. Don't try to boil the ocean. But it's like, again, those old factories that didn't, like in one fell swoop, change everything from those drives to electric drives. We started in an incremental fashion.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I mean, let's kind of like jump into the topic for today, bringing these two worlds together, generative AI and digital twins. So could you elaborate on how this integration can actually create tangible business value for manufacturers? What are like some of the
Yes.
most
So
significant benefits you've seen?
I think, when we look at digital twins, the digital twin up to now that we've been looking at has been pretty much almost like a metadata model. So I have this larger model and I've got some metadata. So I'm building a virtual representation, which is kind of part of the definition, and it's synchronized at a certain frequency and fidelity, again, part of a definition, for example, coming out of Digital Twin Consortium. But it is still just a sort of a one-way metadata model. So now I have state and I have some information and around the physical asset. One of the first things that happened with this kind of digital twin over the last few years has been they're becoming more intelligent. And what we mean by that is we started figuring out how can we plug AI into it, and not necessarily generative AI, but AI like predictive AI. So how can I predict operations? How can I predict when this thing is going to fail, and embed that into the twin and start making the twin almost anticipatory, so it can anticipate. So a good example that Dr. Greaves used at a event where he was speaking is, if you look at the traditional twin, if you think of a safety belt inside a car, it's very reactive. Something has to happen before the twin knows about it. So you need to be in an accident before your safety belt actually engages. With intelligent digital twin, it is anticipatory. So what it will do is it will detect that there's an accident likely to happen, and then your safety belt will deploy before that. So that's the benefit of creating smarter, more intelligent digital twins by taking what is sometimes referred to as traditional AI, but I kind of prefer to talk about it as analytical AI. So the AI that we've had up to now, like regression models and classification models and neural networks and all the machine learning based ones, where we now embed that into twins. So we start making the twins more intelligent, and again they can now be goal seeking instead of goal given. So we because they have this ability to have some understanding capability. The next kind of iteration or phase that we're seeing around that is to say, well, now that we have some level of intelligence that's embedded, so I can ground it in physics, I can ground it in computational fluid dynamics, I can build that model into the twin. Can I now use generative AI to give it some reasoning? And that for us is the next part in terms of and work that we are doing, for example, at XMPRO, is around what they call multi-agent generative systems, where we take the twin, we build, and those twins almost become agents. Well, some of them do, or they all observe an agent, or a digital twin. These agents are almost like virtual employees, and they can't look at the real physical asset because they don't have the perception that we have, like eyes and hearing and all that. They have to look at the twin in order for them to be able to observe what the state is, or the information around that, and they can now either use that to, like I mentioned earlier, generate a specification or do some content-based work. But there's also a different type of agent, which is, for me, the more advanced one, which is a decision agent, and using generative AI and the digital twin, because it can now observe the twin. What these agents can do, they can observe the twin, look at state. They can reflect like humans and think about what they're seeing or observing from the twin, and then take that and based on that reflection, decide if they need to take some action. Now, the action could be just a recommendation for a human being, send an SMS, a Teams message, update in a different system where they can see the information, or it could physically actuate. It could use something like MQTT or whatever, and pass that message back into a system in a safe operating envelope. Those kind of processes, we always, they need to happen in a safe operating envelope where you actually use them now as a new generation control. So this digital twin has gone from a traditional twin to an intelligent twin to multi-agent generative system. There's another component to that, which is what I refer to as a generative twin, which is slightly different. So the generative twin is actually, how can we use generative AI to generate the twin for me, the configuration file or the integration points when I have MQTT on this side and OPC on that side. These two things need to talk to each other. Can a generative twin generate my twin or twin model? Where the other one is, can I use generative AI to actually run my business process using logic and reasoning that observe, reflect, plan, and act component as well.
Awesome stuff. Thank you for kind of like laying out that difference or that progression from traditional to intelligent and to the multi-agent generative twins. We will get into much more details into that a bit later on. So what I want us to do for now is, can you kind of like take us through the approach of how you'd use generative AI to build digital twins, and maybe also kind of like while you explain to us about how that approach differs from the conventional methods?
Yeah, so we have found these, one of the great use cases for this is content generation and content curation. And some of the content is actually the digital twin configuration. So I can ask, and what we've been able to do with what we call our generator, so the twin generator, XMPRO generator, what we've been able to do is use that to run almost like a requirements gathering session. So it can run those workshops for you by asking users certain questions. So we have prompts that we've built into large language model, and different. There's a number of providers that all work in a very similar way, but those agents or those transformers or GPTs or whatever you want to call them, handles a lot of the requirements gathering and then curating and collecting that for me to generate the requirements specification. Once I have that, and also what systems are available in the business, and what system do I need, what analytic do I need to run in order to fulfill this requirement, then for that analytic, what data do I need? These generator, and it's almost like a wizard. You start with the basic questions around the use case and application. The LLM then curates and puts that into a standard format for us. That goes down to what integration do we need? Are there current libraries? Do we need to can we connect to the API documentation and generate what the integration files would be? So I think there are 6 or 7 steps going through all the way to the point where you get to the end and you say generate. Now we know the structure of our file, which is the configuration file for our solution, but likewise, I have seen other digital twin vendors, especially in the digital twin consortium, where they showcase, for example, taking a 2D diagram, hand-drawn 30 years ago with some annotation, putting that into one of these large language models, standard off-the-shelf one, put it in and ask it to generate the Unity file, and then build and say, now that I've got that Unity 2D, please give me a 3D. I want doors, and this is for a hospital, so that they can do contact tracing of infectious diseases. So, that's the use case. But generating the twin and the twin models, the files, the 3D CAD files, all of that being made possible now just with natural language instruction. And likewise for us, we know exactly what the format is of our configuration file. So, or that define from an XMPRO perspective what our data streams look like. At the moment, it's not 100% there on generating the UI components. But it's getting much better. So if I look at what it was 3 months ago versus now versus a year ago, it's kind of a lie. There's a massive difference in that. So again, the UI components, it's more around, can it generate for me the Unity files or the CAD files or the point cloud. Or the point cloud's not so much. It'll sometimes take a point cloud and you can do something with that and transform that. But that's how we see the generative twin, how we generate the twin. As that, it is different to putting a generative model like a chatbot inside the process or inside the twin, which I can now interrogate, which we call generative intelligence. So the generative twin is, how do I generate the twin? Which kind of moves into the generative intelligence part around, okay, how can I now interact with that twin?
Awesome stuff. It's it sounds to me like massive savings. Just kind of like if I have to imagine how you'd ordinarily do it without generative AI, that whole process of kind of like coming up with the Unity diagrams, requirement, and things like that.
The one thing I have to say is it still requires a subject matter expert. It can't just do it by its own. You have to ask the right questions. You have to know what you're looking at. You have to direct it. It's like having a really smart intern that you can just ask questions and it will follow your instructions, but it will only follow your instructions. So you still need to know. So subject matter experts are still really important in being able to put this together.
Okay, and I'd like us to jump into the XMPRO platform shortly. But before we do that, something that I want to confirm with you, in line with the subject matter expertise that you brought up, is what sort of mechanisms do you? I know there's things like RAG and things like that that are being implemented to kind of like make sure that the generative AI has got access to like more localized or specific information to that particular plant. What sort of mechanisms are you using for your platform to ensure that your the digital team has some SME knowledge imbued into it?
Yeah, so a couple of things, and it's actually a great question because it's not just about the knowledge, but also how do we make sure the knowledge doesn't go outside? So, edge-based deployments and those. So how can we run our LLM models locally? And what we don't want for them to do is just hallucinate, just come up with new things. That's the benefit of RAG, which is retrieval augmented generation, is if I give it the right if I give it all the standard operating procedures, the manuals, those things for the job that I'm asking it to do, then it will look at that first. It will take that information and present it to me in a nice presented format as these models give it back to you, but it will first look at that information. And so that's one element. So using RAG and uploading all manuals, procedures, documentation, PNIDs, automation diagrams, all of those. Now, the problem is you've now uploaded all your IP. So you want to make sure that that stays inside your organization. So, and that other people's models don't get trained on yours. So from that perspective, we actually suggest that you do things and at the edge or localized. The other part of making them smart is, so let's say, for example, I have a predictive maintenance agent or a predictive maintenance assistant. One of the things that I can do, there are a large body of libraries out there in Python, for example. So there's a great one for Python for reliability, it's actually called reliability, and it's got Weibull distributions and all the stuff that a good, smart reliability engineer would do. In actual fact, it's almost PhD level. So what I can do is I can take the real-time data coming from my IoT sensors via MQTT or whatever the protocols and things that we bring it in. I can pass that through, and again, that's embedded AI. So now I can pass it through that Python library for reliability, and now it's kind of grounded in that. It's grounded in, it has the manuals, it has the knowledge, and now I'm asking just the generative AI to help me with reasoning or curating the content or doing. So that makes sure that we reduce the number of hallucinations that could occur. The other way to do that is also make sure that the tasks are described narrow enough. So if you give it certain expertise and you create a narrow task base, they are really, really good at answering your question and not hallucinating. It's when you're asking them, is the sky blue? Then they could potentially make up answers because they just want to serve.
Awesome. So yeah, now let's go into the XMPRO digital twin platform, which is basically a suite of different tools, as it were. And one of the tools that I want us to talk about is I don't know if you call it the XMPRO generator, which is I was watching a demonstration that you were showing on YouTube there, where we were kind of like just going through the tool and kind of like building out the digital twin by prompting and things like that. Can you tell us more about how that works and kind of like tell us more about what other sort of like tools are available within your platform for this specific purpose?
Yeah, so if I look at digital twins, and the one that's close to my heart at the moment is the multi-agent generative systems, or MAGs. But if I look at the generator for us is how do we generate those twins? By being, as I said earlier, they can interview end users. It collates all the information, curates it for me, and it actually, as you saw in the video on the YouTube channel, it actually builds up through a series of questions that I ask, and it builds the configuration file for me in a natural language. So it is me working with a business analyst or a business consultant that help me, because it looks at, what are key objectives, what are the value drivers, where's the revenue, what's the business case. All of those things are built into the generator set of that wizard-based structure, and the wizard is almost like a chatbot. So that, again, is one element of what we do. The other part is putting a co-pilot into the process. So it's not really a generator, but our what we call AI assistant is I can interrogate that like you would do just on ChatGPT, just a line. There's no big dashboard or anything. I can ask it any question around data that sits inside my digital twin. Who are my top 10 bad actors at the moment in terms of reliability, or those kind of questions, and then drill down and say how many failures, or what's the mean time between failure, what's the OEE for this production line. I can just interrogate and ask it. But what we also see is if we do pick up alerts and events from systems, we can actually immediately also put additional information to that. So if I get an alert to say this pump is running hot, or it's making a noise and it's vibrating, I can immediately almost get an expert guidance. So let's say I've got a young engineer who's new to this, and I can, because the AI assistant has got access to the manuals and the standard operating procedures and all these other things I mentioned earlier, it can now almost, so as soon as I get this alert, my alert can now come with, here's potentially what this means, and then I can further ask it questions around that. So that's a kind of a second part. So one is we generate the twin, we can interrogate the twin, and now the third part is we can actually, in our product, which is called MAGS, so multi-agent generative systems, we can now use the twin to start automating some of the business processes by being able to so I can have a team of 4 or 5 or 6 agents that run part of my production process, my water utilities processes, and each of them have a unique specific job. They're all powered by large language models. They can do this observations, reflections, making plans, giving the plans to humans to execute, or if we allow them, and we put guardrails around that. We call it rules of engagement. So there are some rules in terms of how they have to play, from obligations, permissions, authorizations, and those kind of rules that sit around them. But those are from an AI and where digital twins are heading. Those are predominantly the 3 key things that we are seeing, over and above just making them smarter and connected, because all of this needs like data streams and things at the back. None of this works if I don't have communication channels, get data in, kind of almost IoT platform. We build our solutions like multi-agent generative systems on our data streams. So for us, the data stream is still the workhorse, because it's got all the connectors and listen for data. It can contextualize data. I can plug in AI into it. I can create actions. So it's the delivery vehicle from an XMPRO perspective for all of these smart things. You don't have to buy a whole new thing. It is just a new capability that is added to the existing digital twin platform.
Okay, so maybe just to kind of like linger on that a bit, this idea of kind of like having these agents being able to access external systems and bring information in, and you've got this ability to kind of like build these pipelines within the XMPRO platform. What sort of like data integration mechanisms do you kind of like mostly support, or do you see a lot out there?
So We see protocol based. So MQTT and people like Hive and others very active in that space. OPC, and so a number of protocol-based integrations, and that's when we connect to sensors and things directly. There's already a number of IoT platforms and things out there that companies have already invested in. So other types of integration mechanisms to the real-time data include things like historians. So there's already an historian, and we're connecting to the historian. So we're getting some of the data from MQTT. We get another part from the historian. There are things like Azure. I can't remember the latest name, IoT hubs, or I'm never sure what that. But so where there's web-based services and specialist services like Azure Digital Twin and those things that you can also connect in. Or on the Amazon side, Twin Maker and those, so you connect potentially cloud-based services in, and then applications, and then APIs for like weather and many of the other, whether they're RESTful or whatever the case might be. And so those are more pull, where some of the others they just publish to a topic, the digital twin listen at that topic. So that's all at the back of the big challenge is really standards around this, and these things can speak multiple languages, unfortunately.
Awesome. So, I mean, you've done a great job of really kind of like laying out these differences into how generative AI and digital twins really come together, starting from like using it to generate the twin, and then the next one, correct me if I'm wrong, actually putting the generative intelligence inside the twin, which is what you call generative intelligence, making digital twins smarter with generative intelligence. I want us to kind of like just go a bit deep into that, and then maybe try and explain to us how exactly that works, like how that integration works, and then maybe if you've got some examples of how this intelligence translates into smart decision making on the factory floor.
Yes. So in terms of how the generative AI, so if we look at generative intelligence, and so again, just the three big buckets. The first one is the generative twin. So we generate the twin, and that's using most like a wizard-based style that collects the data, and then it generates configuration files, Unity files, all of these different things that I may need to generate a twin. The generative intelligence is I can query any data source. Now, there are multiple ways of doing it, but in reality, if you really look what's behind the scenes, and maybe I'm giving away a few trade secrets here, but what's really behind the scenes for that is we take a natural language query. So someone puts in, who are the top 10 bad actors in my business? What the large language model does, it doesn't look at your data. It actually translate that into SQL. So it does a text to SQL translation. So again, the large language models are really good at things like SQL, Python, C#. So it can take your natural language query, turn that into a SQL statement. So text to SQL. We then take that SQL statement in our data stream, go to the right data source, run the query, get the answer back. Now I've got a machine formatted query answer. I pass it back to the large language model and I say, present this. So give me a natural language answer for my SQL formatted information. So it'll then take the question that I had, the answer that comes back, and give me a meaningful to say the top 10 bad actors were this, and here they are displayed in a nice big table, and these were the number of events that happened on there. So that's really how generative intelligence works, kind of at a 50,000 foot level. It's a little bit more complicated, when you start getting into the mechanisms. But for us, the benefit again is we have our data streams, which already have all these connectors to all these systems. So whether you want to interrogate the historian, your ERP system, MES, doesn't really matter. But it's that taking the natural language query, converting it to the right system. So the interesting thing is that system never sees your data. Sorry, the LLM actually never talks to your data. It's not trying to look for the thing in your data. It is just doing a text to SQL, get the answer, and turn it back. So as I said, maybe a little bit of a trade secret, but that's how these things work from a generative intelligence perspective at a really high level. The multi-agents ones, they're slightly more advanced in terms of how they operate. I think your second question, or second part of the question is, are people seeing this, and where are these things are in real applications? I can quote you a number of figures, and I think a whole bunch of other vendors can quote you a number of figures in terms of what these do. But there's a really interesting study that was done at MIT. It's called MIMO, Machine Intelligence for Manufacturing and Operations, where they looked at multiple different use cases using AI on top of that. And there's a significant improvement in operational KPIs because these machines or these AI-based services like digital twins can look at many, many more variables in the process than what we can. So in terms of being able to optimize for multiple variables and those where the real benefits are, not just it saved me 2 hours in writing a spec for a digital twin, but can it help me run my plant at a 5% better OEE? Can it reduce my downtime on underground conveyors in the mine by 40%? And those are numbers that we've seen in terms of some of the applications that we've done, more than 40%. But that's a combination of analytical AI or traditional AI with generative, with all these others. But if anyone is interested, have a look at that MIT Machine Intelligence for Manufacturing Operations. It's been going on for a while, so it's not new. So it's not something that came out yesterday. It's been a long-running study, and there's some really interesting information around the value and benefit of using AI in this kind of digital twin. They don't call it a digital twin, but when you look at that, you'll see a number of validated case studies that show real KPI performance improvements.
Oh, interesting. So, I mean, one of the things that I want to kind of like get clarity on is within the intelligent twin. So we have generative intelligence, and then we have intelligence twins. I guess what I want to understand is to say, how does sort of like classical AI, if you want to call it, fit into that picture? Is it generative AI replacing classical AI, or
No,
are they working together, or how does that work?
They solve two different problems, and I think that's sometimes where some of the confusion is, and around what these things are doing. So if you ask a large language model to do a calculation for you, it's not that good because it's not a calculator. It just predicts the next likely word. So it's a large language model. Where machine learning models or analytical models or classical models are much more mathematically based in order to do mathematical operations. So a mathematical operation could be, I want to do a linear regression of when is this pump going to fail. So I've got some data, and now I'm building a model with machine learning. And it is really good at that in terms of being able to do math and again, that's where we would use some of the analytical AI methods that we or traditional. So one of the things I would do is, if I'm building a solution around predictive maintenance, I will first run a traditional AI model so that I have information that is grounded in physics and math. And the math is the linear curve or the regression curve or whatever, because there's some statistics in math and it's been around for many, many years, well proven. Now that I have that result, I can see how to best present that. And also with other contexts that I may have. That's what the LLM is really good at. So if you look at what a RAG database really is, it's a vector, and it's like a 3D point. So all information gets classified into kind of it's into just a number, which is a 3D point. So all the information that is very similar lives around a certain 3D point in space. So if I now take this information from my traditional model and I look at what other information do I have around me in this space, because that's what the large language model really does, which sometimes might be RAG based, and I can now give you a natural language response back. It's one of the reasons why they can reason, because they actually learn and work the way that we do. We learn by association and building. And so we have 3D spaces in our understanding of information that is in close proximity. And that helps us to kind of articulate that in a similar way. So again, it's a little bit of a technical explanation, but that's one of the reasons why LLMs suck at calculation, but they're really good at writing stories. We need to use them for what they're good at. So content creation, generation, and reasoning is what they're really good at. Calculations are not. So when you combine the two and you first do grounded in the math, grounded in the analytics, and now take that result and I say, what does it mean? Because when I run the predictive analytics just on the analytical side, it'll give me likelihood of failure 80%. So what does it mean? That's the part that the LLM can help you with. So it means you're going to, and by the way, you don't have spares in the store and like a whole bunch of other things that can come from that.
Awesome stuff. So it is really about kind of leveraging the reasoning capabilities of the LLMs to kind of like also, yeah, absolutely. So I mean, kind of going back to our sort of like 3 buckets that we spoke about, and then maybe kind of like now just focusing on the multi-agent generative systems. Could you share some real-world examples of how multi-agent generative systems have been maybe successfully implemented in manufacturing? And are there measurable impacts that you've seen on operations?
Yeah, so it is early days for multi-agent systems, and we are still fine-tuning this, but the results, I always say to people, we just have to beat humans in a way, because the processes that we are trying to manage are ones that people are not great at, because of the large volume of content potentially. But I'll give you some examples. So a large critical infrastructure, like an airport, for example, large water reservoirs that needs to be filled. And what we want to do is maintain it at a certain critical level, so we can't go below the minimum. And we want to fill the tank. Now, anyone can do that. Standard control systems can do that. There's no problem with that. The one challenge that we have is when it's operator driven, we're really struggling to find people that want to do that work now. It's not great work. And so there's a big skills shortage as well as a skills gap that's emerging in manufacturing, oil and gas, mining infrastructure like this. And I'll give you a manufacturing example in a minute as well, but to just finish on this one. So what we have in this water reservoir filling is we also want to only fill when the electricity price is low, because these are large and it's a significant impact. We can reduce the cost of energy significantly by only pumping when the electricity price is low, because the price varies. So now we have 2 conflicting objectives. So a team of 6 agents, one of them being an operations agent, one of them being an energy forecaster. Because what you want is the energy forecaster is trained, specialized, and has a PhD in energy forecasting. It will determine what's the price now. And we also don't want to switch the pump on and off, because that reduces our reliability of the pump. And by the way, we have a reliability agent as well in this team. So the power agent power forecasting or energy forecasting looks at what is the window where we have a certain band of price, and then predicts that using what is used in energy markets. So taking that and communicating that back to the operations agent, who can then decide when to pump. There's a safety agent that looks at environmental safety, operators in the area, a bunch of other things in terms of when can we pump safely and when not. So there's a safety override, and it's a safety agent. Again, the operations agent will now pump based on kind of when the right time slots. But if there's a certain critical level, I need to maintain that. The reliability agent looks at the infrastructure and go, the remaining useful life on this pump is 48 hours or whatever the number would be. I need 8 hours to get a crew to go and fix that. The crew is still a human crew. So there will be a work order that's created. But I need an 8-hour slot. So you need to fill the buffer so that we have 8 hours. So those are all conflicting things that a team of agents do really well. They can communicate with each other. And by the way, the communication mechanism at the back is MQTT. Using UNS and all those other good things, so we can monitor them. So we have monitorability and understanding of what they do and how they behave. But we also have a water quality agent in that same team, because we need to make sure that that the water quality is maintained at a certain level, because it's going into other critical infrastructure like cooling and others. So we need to maintain certain levels of water quality. And then there's agent that just track our KPIs. What these things are really good at is self-monitoring. And if we set a goal, they can check how good are we at the goal. They're much better than humans at self-reporting. Now, this example that I've just given you is it's a very narrow one, and that's typically how we see these. We're not trying to replace a job of the whole water plant operator. For this specific use case or this specific application, this team is organized around that goal, and they only focus on that goal, and we can measure that goal. And again, there's 6 of those agents in that. In a factory environment, real-time OEE optimizer, where it can have one of the agents is a simulator. Sorry, just to go back to the water one, seeing savings of like energy reduction of 25% on that specific use case. So, and it's not just the energy, but it's also the carbon or the carbon footprint of that. The other part of like the OEE one, 4 agents. I think there's 4 agents in that one running looking at first pass yield and a number of operational parameters inside a smart factory. But also optimizing OEE in real time. So there's availability agent or specialist. There's a reliability and quality specialists who are PhDs in there. Remember, we said we can pre-train them or put like a Python libraries and things in them so that they have that PhD capability. They all get the real-time information from the shop floor. And they can collaborate with each other, but they have their own observations, their own reflections, create their own plans, and those plans can then be shared. You can either have it supervised, where one agent can be the supervisor agent, or they can just collaborate and decide what plans to do. But there are other specialist support agents, like a simulation agent, which again has been grounded in something like SimPy. So it understands how can I run a simulation in a factory. Say, if I do this, would it improve the output? So that will impact my OEE. So those are, and again, we know as humans, these are good things to do. We just don't have the time. We need to collect the data, or we need to put it in a spreadsheet, and we need to kind of do some of the analysis. These things can just do it in real time, continuously. And it focuses, and again, it's self-monitoring, and we can see the impact. Again, with OEE, the impact can be quite significant. And some of the results look like, you can have like a 30% increase in OEE, but it also depends where you start. So, but that's some of the interesting things that we're seeing with these multi-agents.
Awesome stuff. Yeah, so maybe to kind of like wrap things up here, let's talk about what I mean, as you mentioned, this is early days, but I want to kind of like get a sense of where do you see this going? What does like the future of a modern factory look like for you?
Yeah, I think we will have a blend of we will see. This is all about decision intelligence. So how do we make decisions better? It's not so much about just the business processes, but the decision intelligence. So the digital twin can help us with like decision support, as we see in dashboards and those kind of things. So it can help us with decision augmentation. So that's where we have the co-pilot, and it's helping us. So it's augmenting our knowledge, but we're still inside the loop. And we are now seeing some of these where the human is on the loop, and it's providing that decision automation. And just one thing I forgot to mention earlier. So the way that this work is actually, these multi-agents that can reason, that's actually research work that came out of Stanford and others. So this is grounded again in proper research around how these things work. So based on the current research that we're seeing in academic institutions and large organizations who are investing, the Google type organizations and others and Microsoft is putting a lot of R&D money into this. We're seeing significant impact. And one of the things that I can, where we see this going is we actually don't know, but what we do know is it will be we're not planning for how things work today, because if we look at the pace of what has happened over the last 18 months in terms of where we went from where we were to where we are right now, compared to where we will be in 18 months' time with the acceleration of these technologies. For us, it's about how do we have a significant impact in manufacturing productivity. And the productivity is just, what has been produced but divided by the number of people hours. If we can raise, because we can't increase the number of people hours, we are limited in that because of the available resources. If we can raise the output, we will have a significant input. Over the last 15 years, the curve has been flat from a productivity point of view, especially for manufacturing. That's really what I think we can change. We can change the shape of that curve for productivity and the output, and through that we will better everyone's lives. Every single time we have, so when we went from trains to electricity, we have seen a significant increase in quality of our personal lives. And I honestly believe we will see a similar thing using this generative capability or utility that we can plug into to support us going forward.
Awesome stuff. And then lastly, with regards to the Digital Twin Consortium, you mentioned earlier some efforts like the capabilities periodic table. I wanted to get a sense of whether are you working on anything with regards to generative AI within the consortium?
Yes, we have. As I said, there's actually a joint working group that we've set up with the bigger OMG, which includes area and some of the other consortia inside OMG, the Object Management Group. Because we see, it touches everything. It touches the twin, the XR, VR, all of those things come together. And so yes, we have a team that's very active on that. And for example, the capabilities periodic table, we've now turned that into a machine readable format. And the reason for that is we want to generate your twin using the capabilities periodic table through a large language model. That's the natural next step for this, where we went from a spreadsheet, which you had to fill in, to a large language model that can assist you and spit out in machine readable, in a human readable form, but we can feed it a machine readable form. So the number of initiatives inside Digital Twin Consortium, a big focus, and there's also a big focus. There are a number of members who are actively involved in developing multi-agent generative systems. So if anyone's interested, please monitor that. You'll see there's webinars and all sorts of things coming up around that from a Digital Twin Consortium perspective.
Awesome stuff. Yeah, we'll provide links to all the items that we discussed about today here in the description of this session. So Thank you so much, Peter, for your time here today. Do you have any last words for our audience?
No, I just want to thank you for the effort that you're doing in the community. I mean, it's great to see people like yourself do that promote this type of work, and it's not just the traditional elements that we're seeing, but also some of the more innovative and new things. So from the larger community, we just want to thank you as well for doing this.
Thank you so much, and this brings us to the end of our conversation.